Hello everybody. So I've been doing a little bit of thinking about the ASMR material that I've been putting up on my channel lately, and I've decided to make a couple of changes to it. Number one, I've decided I am not a fan of the short video clip format that I have been doing. Instead, I think I'm going to start putting together longer videos where I'm reading multiple books and other things. Probably going to be about an hour long or so. And number two, I think I'm going to be switching to a soft-spoken format for the time being rather than a whispering thing like I had going on before. Whispering is something that I want to explore a little bit more in the future. This whole ASMR thing started off as an experiment, and there's a lot of different things I want to do with it, but it also means that I'm going to be trying different things as well. So for now, I just want to kind of take things into a little bit of a different direction. So we're going to see how that works out. In the meantime, I'm going to get into reading some things here, and I'm actually going to be reading some things that I had already put together in clips just to get them in a single video because I might not be keeping those old clips. So, let's see what we've got here. We're going to start with Abydon's Hands. Of all the stories of all the gods, no doubt one of the most charming is the legend of Abydon's Hands. In some cultures, Abydon's hands are tiny, cheerful creatures that hide in the walls and in the cracks between paving stones. In others, they are silent men of stone who roam distant lands. In all such tales, however, they are Abydon's constructs, built in his image to continue his good work of creating strong and wondrous things in this world. Thus, upon spying a mighty mountain peak, or a row of Adra pillars, or another natural marvel, parents and nursemaids will tell young children that these are the work of Abydon's hands. Such is the appeal of Abydon as a deity, as it is through his legend that we recognize familiar shapes in the natural world. Thus, when we see a land form that resembles a colonnade, or an arched gate, or a mighty home, we see a hand and a purpose at work that is not unlike our own. And while Abydon's own identity as a construct is alienating to some, to many of us, his crude yet practical shape is comforting. While the other gods take the form of birds, beast, and sea, Abydon takes the shape of our most common tools and constructions. His debasement in a body of iron elevates our own works and labors, and it offers us a grand hope. For if a god could rebuild himself out of iron, what wonders might Kith create with her own hands? Moving on to Tides and Moons, a natural historian's account. We have all heard the legends of Adra and Senbalafa, and the explanation that the goddess's love for the moon causes the tides, and, as men and women of science, we know this to be but a shadow of truth. Yet there is another myth that we have been quicker to dismiss, and I wonder if it does not merit further examination. Andrites tell of a smaller moon, Eoni Berthir, that the goddess supposedly pulled from the sky in an earlier age. And while such a thing seems impossible, for Eoni Berthier still roams the skies above, it is true that explorers in the far reaches have found mineral fragments that do not naturally occur on any known continent in Eora. Furthermore, naturalists in Adir, Rauatai, and Adirwood have observed the remains of ancient ocean life many miles inland. Such a thing would only be possible if Eora's oceans had once been larger, or, as I hear propose, if a catastrophic flood had once washed over the continents. While few phenomena could cause a flood of this magnitude, a large body falling into the seas just might do the trick. In these pages, I will explain how some force of nature, if not an amorous goddess, could have pulled a small moon into Eora millennia ago. And unfortunately, there are in fact no more pages to that book. Shame. Next up we have the Moons of Eora. Look up into the night sky and you'll see the moon Balafa. Ubiquitous and persistent, she remains forever in view, but also forever out of reach. What many people do not know, however, is that our world is actually orbited by two moons, Balafa and Kaldha. Balafa, hanging low and large in the sky, Balafa travels swiftly in her race around the world, completing an orbit in about 18 days. This proximity and speed can cause extreme tide conditions in some areas, making the seas shift so quickly and rise so high that there are some beautiful coastal areas that are virtually uninhabitable for a good portion of the year. Before we learn the truth behind the cause of the tides, legend held that Andra, the goddess of the sea, was in love with the moon, and when she saw it in the sky, the tides, great waves, and violent storms that happened were her attempts to reach it. This is why the moon is formally called Sen Balafa, or Andran Balafa, the beloved, or Andra's beloved. Kaldha. 315 years ago, the Grand Empire of Aelia suffered from terrible storms and terrifyingly high and low tides. Records show the same thing was happening in the Adir Empire, and as several new Adiran colonies along the Dirwood coast were completely destroyed by storms and high tides that engulfed the settlements. At that time, during an eclipse, Glenfathan astronomers spotted something small orbiting near the edge of Balafa. After much study, they realized it was a small satellite with an extremely irregular orbit. They called it Kaldha Deb, or the Black Runner. Since it is smaller than Balafa, it doesn't have much effect on the world, but when it aligns with Balafa's orbit, it wreaks havoc on the tides and weather everywhere. This happens with an erratic frequency and severity, and have been dubbed Lover's Tides. Kaldha has been rolled into the Andra myth, and when they are both in sight, her desire to reach them is increased tenfold, which is what causes the terrible weather. Next up we have the Sea and Her Love, traditional Andrite hymn. The sea beheld her love, shining bright from on high. She bade him come down from his palace in the sky. Her love could not be swayed, so she took a peace into her heart, and all who saw her grieve that day sleep in her bosom still. A more shorter one. This one's a little bit longer. The Saints' War, Part 1, Overthrow. There is much debate with historians as to when the Saints' War really began. It is widely accepted that the event that instigated it was the sanctuary flight of Raid-Saran citizens to the Deerwood. This led to direct strife between the two nations and escalated into battle, the Saints' War. But it is the author's opinion that the war truly started many years before. After the miracle of the Verdant Vorlas, as it came to be known, Widewind quickly gathered followers, drawn to the stories of Aethys' miraculous prophet. His power grew. Eventually, Widewind had gained enough support that he confronted the imperial governor. Assisted by a collection of knights and nobles who had been swayed to his cause, he marched on the capital city. The governor was allowed to live, but was forced to abdicate power and leave the colony. This was not from any understanding or easy acquiescence from the governor, but because of what happened when Widewind entered the governor's palace. As Widewind approached the governor, according to accounts, his body turned into something that was no longer human. His flesh became luminescent, and his head transformed into pure, blinding light. Other accounts suggest that Widewind had become a being of light at an earlier time when he was whipped in the public square. The outcome of his visit to the palace, however, is uncontested. The governor, knowing there was no way he could oppose an avatar of Aethys, relinquished his power. People then asked Widewind to lead the colony. He accepted, earning him the name Divine King of Raid-Saran. Widewind's rule was virtually uncontested. Initially, this was because everyone was awed that a god had chosen to manifest himself and lead his people. This changed as Widewind began punishing the allies of the old empire and the poison on the world, what he considered corrupt churches or church leaders of Aethys. Scrutiny escalated, and soon worshippers of Aethys were also being punished for mere perceptions of heresy. Members of other religions were also added to lists of the persecuted for following different faiths. This caused large segments of the population to flee Raid-Saran for the Deerwood, begging for sanctuary. This caused strife between the two nations. The people of the Deerwood knew that they could not sustain explosive population growth if Widewind's rule were to continue unchecked. They also feared that his eye would turn from Raid-Saran and land on them next if nothing was done. This was exactly what ultimately happened. An open war broke out as Widewind moved to spread his dominion to the lands of Deerwood. Moving on to Book of the Hunt. When my students ask to be taught the way of Galawain, I tell them they have already failed. Does one ask a deer to present itself as dinner? Of course not. One must outwit, outmaneuver, and overpower the deer if one dreams of venison. So it is with the secret god. To ask a question is weakness and idle indecision. To seek answers is to understand, and to become one with Galawain. Survival begins with strength from within. But I only strike my students when they ask the second stupid question, for all of us begin young and weak. It is a point fact, and not one of shame, and a central tenet to Galawain's teachings. Perseverance and cleverness are prized by Galawain above brute force, a fact my young pups often forget. It is right and proper that the strong lead the weak, and It is equally proper that the strong be continually tested until the balance changes. Galawain celebrates the strength of the victor and the prowess of the well-fed predator. But above all, the clever hound celebrates the transformative nature of strength. Galawain's greatest desire for us is that prey becomes predator, yearling babes grow into strong hunters, and the lost find their own enlightenment. This philosophy is best exemplified by the rites of the Animphatha of Ir-Glanfath. When one of the Glanfathan spiritual leaders is old and nearing death, it is customary to enter the woods and confront Galawain's herald. If the seeker god finds that Amphath's life, deeds, and soul worthy, the reward is a quick death, and his soul joins Galawain's pack. If deemed unworthy, the Animphath is killed, his soul forced to find its own way to the next life, and his memory erased from the records of the tribe. Survival begins with strength from within, and weak leaders endanger the whole pack. This is Galawain at his purest. Even at the end of life, one must struggle for worthiness, for greatness, just as one must struggle every day to feed his pack. The seeker god is easy to understand if one actively engages in the quest for knowledge, but his secrets are self-oculating to those who merely ask, desiring knowledge without the requisite hunt. My own flesh and blood once asked me, "Will learning to hunt please Galawain?" I told him yes, but added, "Galawain would prefer that you hunt to learn." Excerpts from the Sermon of Struggle. Choice is a luxury we earn through peace. Struggle is our fundamental nature. Even when our war banners sit idle, mankind foments strife. Friends argue with fists, lovers rekindle jealousies, merchants compete with lies. Wherever mankind goes, struggle follows. Pargrunen is goddess of fire and war, not bloodshed and conquest. The many in Reitzeris would tell it differently. How bitter they must be that Pargrunen's priests were able to destroy a god made manifest. How bitter indeed. We who worship Pargrunen are not addled barbarians or cloistered mystics. We are soldiers, armorers, watchmen, and bodyguards, artisans of conflict and protectors of our families and flags. We do not salivate for battle. We view war as unwelcome. The struggle is our fundamental nature. We do not pray for strife. We pray for the wisdom to resolve it quickly. We do not wish for war. When it inevitably must be fought, we find divine ecstasy in discipline, efficiency, and excellence. Pargrunen, guide us to the battle that is just and fair. Let us be your fire that burns away the profane, leaving only the righteous. If struggle is our fundamental nature, let victory be our inevitable state of grace. Let's go with Missives of the Handicall. Dearest brother, or was it sister? May this letter find you in well spirits. A man of thuggish bearing stormed into my library the other day and demanded I help him find a book on the construction of an arquebus. I thought it proper service to wail to steer this man toward an illuminated manuscript on the subject of whittling toy soldiers and other miniature props. Unamused by my solution, I shrugged and said, "What is an answer without a question?" He did not find my spiritual rhetoric helpful or amusing. and so he punched out 2 of my teeth. I trust her summer has been less tumultuous than mine. In more important news, my apprentice claims she saw the eyeless face in a dream the other night. I admit, I was so mad with envy that at first I refused to believe her. Well, forgive me for such a lapse of judgment. She described an Amawa of brilliant blue hues with a featureless face surrounded by a swarm of eyes, no 2 eyes alike. She claims Whale ignored her questions as she can't recall any specifics of what was said. In fact, my apprentice seems to have forgotten many things since before the visitation. She could not tell me where she grew up or what she liked to eat. At first, I was so envious of her for having seen Whale with her own eyes, but it seems Whale's visit was to conceal, not to illuminate. I pray she endures this test of faith and can look back at the event and feel the joy of mystery. What is an answer without a question? Last week I felt the solution was ignorance, but after Whale's visit, I feel the road without length is closer to the capturing the riddle. I worry my apprentice will look back at her visit from Whale and feel cheated, robbed of some moment of clarity we all thought we were owed when we first joined. I tried to tell her she was lucky, but she was too young to understand. What is an answer without a question? May I be dead and my soul scattered to the winds before anyone knows for certain. The Enigmatic God of Cold. Young students are often confused by Bereth and Rimmergant's seemingly overlapping roles in holding dominion over death. Bereth oversees the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Rimmergant oversees the cold, destructive act of death itself. This difference is often difficult for novices to appreciate until they've lost a loved one and endured the absence for a time. It is Bereth that determines we will be reborn just as certainly as we will die, but Rimmergant is the executioner's axe. Rimmergant shows us that all life ends in stillness. I need only show them the symbol of Rimmergant, the bone-white aurochs skull found carved within the most ancient of Engwithan ruins. It is a symbol of death and doom in every culture. Any child with 4 winters under his belt needs no introduction to the ancient symbol. Rimmergant embodies not just death, but all manifestations of collapse, be they famine, plague, or simple bad luck. Rimmergant is a primal god, silent and inscrutable as death itself. He makes himself known with his passing, not by proclamation. There are innumerable stories of the god's terrifying passage through the lands of Eora. When the beast of winter stirs, bitter winds and beastly howling follow the creature's every move. Wherever the beast plants a hoof, all life withers into dust. The faithful of Rimmergant insist that even another god's life can end in stillness. They claim the other gods must flee from the beast of winter's mastery over death. But we know not if this boast holds true. Though the beast of winter is shrouded in snowy clouds, those who have seen the shaggy white monster claim that the souls of the fallen can be seen clinging, or perhaps frozen, to the beast's fur. The dwarves of the boreal south have numerous stories that tell a similar plot. A brash hero seeks out the beast of winter to rescue the souls trapped in his fur. These tales never end well, for even if the hero saves his beloved soul, the hero dies in the process. For it is not a proper tale, Rimmergant, unless the hero's life ends in stillness. The Ethik Nol. The Ethik Nol is a group of fascinating and dangerous. An ancient druidic order, its beliefs fall well outside what the average person might imagine of druids. Though details are sketchy, the Ethik Nol would seem to have originated in the White March, as the order itself consists mostly of dwarves. The traditional druidic chants of the Ethik Nol speak of the people as a collective whole that created a necessary balance through their strict adherence to the purity of their line. This has been interpreted by historical chroniclers to mean that there was a time when only dwarves were allowed to be Ethik Nol. Residing now in Twin Elms, records of the Ethik Nol date back to well before the settlement had arrived at its present name, and in fact, some information places them in Twin Elms even before the Glenfathans arrived. If this is truly the case, the Ethik Nol are one of the oldest druidic orders in existence. Their beliefs don't conform to what is normally viewed as a druidic viewpoint. Sacrifice, blood, fire, and an intense drive for balance in all things, well, beyond most druidic standards, pervade their rituals. Core to this is the dogma that if you want something from the universe, you must also sacrifice something into the universe to maintain the balance. Nothing can ever be received without something first given. If you perform the sacrifice, your desires will always be satiated. The simplest example of this sacrificial balance is explained to the author when it's thus. Say you are one of these Ethik Nol, and say you want your daughter's marriage to go well. You don't want problems. Say you ask of the elders what you must do. You are told what the appropriate sacrifice is, and then you perform it. In this case, it could be as simple as throwing some coins into lava, giving the metal back to the earth, sacrificing something that is important to you, right? But the requirement is always different, and you don't know what is expected of you until you're asked. The more significant request, the more significant the demand, and most things of true value must be paid in blood. I was told of people removing fingers, toes, even whole limbs. One farmer was reputed to have sacrificed his youngest son. Another good question many people have raised is in regards to the Glenfathans. Why do they allow such a potentially violent, possibly dangerous group to live in your Glenfath? Why not force them out? Rumors are that the Ethik Nol are able to make from an ancient recipe a unique war paint, apparently blood-based, and they are the only people in the world who can. The Glenfathans, it is said, have come to believe this war paint provides tremendous advantage in combat, and the essence of the Ethik Nol in Twin Elms is predicated on the fair trade of the substance. Precepts and Proverbs of Abydon. For every work there is a practice. Arm yourself with skill and temper your labors with patience. Strike only when your medium is ready. Do not cold work plate. Brittle steel is worse than a treacherous friend. Temper your work, lest it shatter like glass. Fools praise appearance, but the master praises strength. True virtue lies in work well done. Pattern-wielded steel shall be folded no fewer than 7 times. The finest smith cannot shape poor metals. Set your hand to steels that have been properly treated with charcoal. Like a room full of discord is a forge with uneven heat. Do not let it pervert your metal. As the blows of the hammer speak to the steel, so the color of the steel speaks to the smith. Like a babe, heated steel is fragile and easily corrupted. Handle it gently, lest your haste twist and warp it. Do not neglect work that lies hidden and unseen, for a shoddy tang can break the blade. The wise smith works carefully and anneals but once. The careless smith weeps to find flaws after the steel has been hardened and tempered. As a blade drawn in multiple heats is work done in its proper time. On the binding of souls. The margins of this text are scribbled with notes and references. The ink-stained pages appear to have seen much use in earlier times. The removal and transference of souls is a practice both ancient and sophisticated. There is evidence that the Inquisitors were particularly adept at this, yet few details have survived them. Someone scrawled Annals of the Pargrunen, pages 382 to 386 below this paragraph. What is known is that the removal of a soul is a difficult process, and one that requires an expert hand and precise tools for any chance of success. Early attempts on a test pool of 138 goats left most of the subjects with maimed or fractured souls. In all but 2 of the 11 instances where the soul was successfully removed, the essence dissipated before scholars could capture it. The words, "transferred to holding vessel," are written and underlined in the margin. The process requires conductive materials, copper and adra specifically. Immersion in water is important to ensure that the soul is drawn in a steady and uniform manner, with no distortions or breakages. A warped soul is at best useless, and at worst unpredictable. An arrow points from this paragraph to a scrunched note. Extraction pool in CR, 18 feet wide by 3 feet deep. We have since mastered the process of soul transference and have seen the benefits of infusing forged work with the essence of animals and wilder. What remains to be seen is whether we might see greater gains from using the souls of kith, where we would procure the appropriate subjects, and how much personality and autonomy we would want to leave intact in such cases. A string of notes winds around and below this paragraph, beginning with criminals, prisoners of war, volunteers, and ending with forged guardians in block letters. Annals of the Pargrunen. It was in the time of Edrahil the Sure-footed that we came to Cleobon Relag, an ancient place of the builders, as the locals call them. It was a marvelous sight, a door in the mountain framed by a pair of gaulish aspects. Through some exercise of trickery or cunning, Edrahil was able to gain access for our scholars, that we might observe and record what lay inside. We discovered a foundry of sorts, the like of which neither we nor our distant brethren had seen. Through careful observation, we surmised that the ancients had used this place to extract souls and transfer them to suits of armor. Delicate and challenging work, yet the scale they had achieved left us humbled and astounded. Perhaps most remarkable were the golems, living suits of armor powered by essence. We lost 2 of our fellows when the creatures caught us unawares, but once we'd subdued them, they proved quite fascinating. All too aware that our hosts would never again allow us, or other curious travelers, to visit this place, we took meticulous notes and measurements of all we saw, forsaking bread and sleep until the work was done. We reported all to Hill, whereupon he praised our work and urged us quickly forward, for if such a place lay abandoned in the forest, who could say what other mysteries gods and kith have left in this strange and wild land? The Iroccian Calendar. Iroccio, the New Year. While only 150 years old, and of alien origin as well, the Iroccian Calendar is currently used throughout most of the Deerwood and surrounding areas. While the Deerwood was using the Iroccian Calendar until recently, they gave it up in favor of the Iroccian Calendar. The transition was easy to get people to make because the Iroccian Calendar was hopelessly inaccurate. Iroccio calculated that it takes the planet approximately 334 days to orbit the sun, so he took the 9 months from the Iroccian Calendar and broke them into 16 months of 20 days each, with each season consisting of 4 months. The length of each month corresponds to how long it takes Balafa, one of our moons, to circle the planet. At the end of each season, 3 days, not part of either season, are set aside for people to celebrate the transitions. Lastly, the final 2 days of the year, New Year and Mid-Year, are used to observe the beginning and midpoint of the year. To prevent any confusion for the transition from the old calendar to the new, Iroccio kept the year the same. So, although the calendar has only been in existence for 150 years, it is currently 2823 Iroccio. Iroccio gave the months Valian names, but in the Deerwood and the surrounding areas, they call them by their translated names. The year is broken down in the following way. New Year, a day to celebrate the arrival of the new year. Of all the holidays, this one is celebrated by most people around the Deerwood and the Valiant Republics. Each new year is greeted with a fervent zeal to begin things anew and start with a fresh slate. Winter months, 2 at the beginning of the year and 2 at the end. Deep winter, Inverno. Late winter, Inverno. Spring dawn, 3 days, in Prima, used to celebrate the transition of the world, rebirth, and spring. Ethician festivals are especially prevalent at this time, or were prior to the Saints' War. Spring months, early spring, pre-Prima, mid-spring, Mashprima, deep spring, Fawnprima, late spring, Tarprima. Summer rising, 3 days, in Nestu, a period of transition from birth to growth. Many ceremonies designed to usher children into adulthood take place during summer rising. Summer months, in mid-year, early summer, Priestu, midsummer, Majestu, mid-year, a day of reflection and introspection. The year is half over. People who made promises on New Year use mid-year to assess their progress and renew their oaths. Deep summer, Fonestu. Late summer, Terestu. Autumn falling, 3 days, in Autumn. Harvest celebrations happen during autumn falling if the crops were particularly bountiful. If the harvest was small, supplication is given to the gods asking for a better harvest the following year. Autumn months, early autumn, pre-autumn, mid-autumn, maj-autumn, deep autumn, faunaton, late autumn, taraton. Winter dusk, 3 days, in Everno. Winter dusk is filled with celebrations of life and vigils for the dead. The world is returning to sleep, plants die, and those still alive raise a toast to another year. Winter months, early winter, pre-Verno, midwinter, Magiverno. Skaenite Scripture. Burn. Feel thy hatred twist within thee. Feed thyself on its bile. Sustain thyself on its anger. This hatred, this bile, this anger, these shall be the tools for thy rebellion. Let thine heart seethe. There is no satisfaction in open confrontation. Hide thine hatred. Let it grow, that it may fester. Make thy plots in secret. The quiet slave stays in the shadows. His face seeks not the light. In darkness doth he work. In darkness doth he move. Rebel against those that seek to control thee. Rebel against those that wish to remove thee. Final Journal of Jonas. My son, tomorrow I become the effigy. Tomorrow I become Skyne's embodiment on Eora. Tomorrow my master chokes on his own whip. For months we met by secret conclave to plot our landlord's demise, all the while working the fields as if our hearts were content. Skyne teaches us to plot with the mind while keeping one's face impassive, inscrutable. Fair fights are for those with armies. The quiet slave is our whetstone, our focus. In his worship, our cause finds focus, clarity, and possibility. Tomorrow, my master chokes on his own whip. By the time you read this, I will be dead. I pray Sky does not abandon me for speaking of my plotting, but a son deserves to know how his father died, for I have volunteered to be the effigy. Sky will inhabit my body, using this old farmer's simple flesh as a puppet of godly rage. I have been shaved and anointed. Tomorrow morning, I will be your father in name only, as my manhood will be removed, my nose and ears removed, and my useless mortal eyes will be replaced with flint stones, through which Sky might see the world. My son, I am sorry for the lies I have told you these past few seasons, but Sky demands secrecy. Even your mother knows nothing of my furtive service to the quiet slave. Curse my name if you must, but never weep for me, for I die for the betterment of our community, to smite our Lord's corruption from the face of Eora. Tomorrow, my master chokes on his own whip, for tomorrow I become the effigy. Development of a Crucible Knight, Part 2, Senior Ranks. Commander and Forge Master. Once a path is chosen, the knight's life is spent training in his preferred discipline. The pomp and formalities that surrounded his life up to this point are all but gone. The training is far more rigorous, and there is less ceremony to mark his progress. For most knights, commander, body, or forge master, soul, are further than they will ever advance. The training of a knight at this level, while almost exclusively in the discipline he has chosen, is still rounded out with instruction from the other. A knight is not truly a knight if he does not have a full breadth of knowledge. When he passes from justiciar to commander, the knight is given a blue cape to wear with his plate armor. When a templess rises to the position of forge master, he is presented with a white cloak. Marshal and Crucible. After time spent training, an elite knight that shows true leadership potential and promise is elevated to the next level. A knight of the body becomes a marshal, and a knight of the soul becomes a Crucible. At this point, he is in command of a small group of knights, commander, forge master, and below. He is responsible for the recruitment, initiation, and advancement of new squires. Many knights do not want to advance to this level and beyond because the role becomes less hands-on and more advisory. Marshals are known for their purple capes, while Cruciblars are distinguished by a gold cloak. Lord, Justiciar, and Grand Templus. A marshal or Crucible that shows true and effective command over the knights in his keeping may be offered the position of Lord Justiciar of the body or Grand Templus of the soul. Truly a command position, a knight that accepts one of these roles will be removed from the front lines. Because of this, it is only the most dedicated leaders that take either of these positions. Lord Marshal and Grand Crucible. There is not a single knight that oversees the entire group. This responsibility is split between the Lord Marshal, body, and the Lord Crucible, soul. Any knight that advances to this position does so only with the support of the knights as a whole. He must be nominated and selected by a majority of the knights. Once in a position, he is there for life. The Lord Marshal or Lord Crucible may step down from this post if he so chooses, but that is only to retire from the life of a knight. The stress and responsibility of this position is such that many refuse it, even if they are capable of handling it. Lord Marshals and Cruciblars are well known and generally respected throughout the land, not just within the knights. The life and discoveries of Pangram. Mention the name Pangram to anyone with even a passing knowledge of Enigmacy, and you can find yourself in for a very long discussion. Publicly reviled, but privately lauded as a hero and genius, Pangram's history is at turns revolutionary, horrific, and mysterious. Pangram was fascinated, some might say obsessed, with the concept of Enigmacy. It consumed his life as he dedicated everything to understand it. He would frequently travel to Iroccian and the Deerwood to visit the Inquisition ruins. There, he would take notes and make sketches, bringing anything back with him that he could to help him unlock the mysteries. After years of study, Pargrunen had reached a point where he could no longer conduct research on his own, and he took on an assistant, Helig of Thine. Soon, Helig was making trips to Iroccian in Pangram's stead, gathering knowledge while Pangram stayed behind to experiment. This partnership quickly bore fruit, and Pangram made a breakthrough, one that would irrevocably change his life and the general attitude about animacy forever. While the specifics of his experimentation will never truly be known, the rumors and stories that still circulate tell that he had sent out inquiries, asking for live subjects for help with a dangerous experiment that might change their life, or might end it. Those who were already dying were especially encouraged to apply. Response was overwhelming, and Pangram had his pick of numerous willing bodies. That is when he had his breakthrough. He discovered a way to fix the soul, anchoring it to its body so it couldn't leave at death. He had discovered eternal life. His research and life's work had resulted in the single greatest discovery that animacy could hope for. His findings were published and quickly spread through Valia and beyond. While some groups, the Wodekin Church, for example, decried his work as nothing more than blasphemy and heresy, many put it to practice. Everyone wanted the chance at immortality. But everything comes with a cost. It quickly became apparent that simply restraining the soul while keeping the person technically alive was doing nothing for the body, which continued to decay, devolving and warping the soul now trapped inside. The creatures it created were dangerous, carnivorous beasts that killed brutally and indiscriminately. The backlash was ruthless. The practice of Pangram's discoveries was outlawed. His works were collected and burned. He and Helig were branded heretics and hunted, chased from town to town until Pangram simply vanished. Helig was tracked down, captured, and brought to trial for the atrocities committed against Valia and his people. The trial was barely more than a formality to bring charges against him, as everyone knew what hand he had played in the disaster. He was sent to prison for years, but eventually released once public outrage died down. Not long after his parole, he disappeared as well. Occasionally, talk surfaces that a copy of Pangram's theorems has been found, untouched by the purging flames that destroyed his brothers. These rumors seldom end up being more than that. Many groups and wealthy individuals have formed, sending out a call to anyone who will listen. Find us a copy of the theorems. They offer gold, jewels, status, anything they can to entice adventurers to help them achieve their goals. For there are those who would give anything in a chance of immortality, even become a monster. The queen that was, and still is. Dear sisters, do you still remember your first deliverance? When you strangled your first wrongdoer, did you see the moment when life became death? Could you see the instance when your victim realized that Wodekin forgets nothing? When Wodekin takes back her throne, will you face her with pride, knowing you have held to your own hosts, or will you be amongst the world breakers? Wodekin teaches vengeance and memory, and while she is in exile, we must be her eyes and ears that let no injustice slip from record. We must be clenched fist that silences the lying breath. When Wodekin takes back her throne, all of the injustices that have slipped through the cracks of history will be righted. The villains hiding in plain sight amongst the innocent will feel the burdened queen's choking grasp. Pray that you live to see the day when you will join our Queen in his cleansing of the wicked. But know, my sisters, that we must be ready to see the end of our days without the return of our Queen, for she will take back her throne, but it may be our daughters to serve the restored court. We must continue to live as we have always lived, hated by the other faiths, even though we place justice above our own well-being. At least the Empire of Adir still holds our creed in proper esteem. It is a proper sign of respect that, by imperial custom, our clergy must oversee a contract for it to be legally binding. For who else understands the value of remembering one's oaths than Woedica's faithful? And let us not count our current blessings, for we still enjoy the support of the Paladin Order of the Steel Garrote. They too understand a society is built and broken by the oaths and rules of its people. When Woedica takes back her throne, my family will know that I am right to commit my life to the exiled Queen. When Woedica takes back her throne, the Strangler will stop being a story told to frighten our daughters, but a hero, woven into parables that teach our children justice. When Woedica takes back her throne, she will bring her flawless memory with her. Every transgression, every crime, and every injustice will be revealed. When Woedica takes back her throne, even gods won't be spared their due retribution. Eothesian Prayer. And the sun shall break through the darkness, the new dawn arriving with the rebirth of the day. Rejoice, all ye who dwelleth in the shadow, who are broken and beaten. The winter soon comes to an end. Spring shall rise, bringing light and life to the world. Radiant light, radiant life, and thy soul shall find warmth in his arms. All creatures bask in his glory. The rays of his countenance bathe the world, bringing an end to the night, ushering in the day. Kneel before him and wonder at his benevolence. Feel the warmth of his radiant presence. If thou art broken, he shall make thee whole. If thou art in darkness, he shall bring thee to the light. If thou art sinful, thou shalt be reborn. If thou art cold, his warmth shall bolster thee. How canst I, so lowly and worn, speak words of proper adulation? Thine eyes, whose gaze sees sin in me yet still shows love. Thine hands, whose grip pulls me out of darkness. Thine ears, listening to my every prayer. Thine heart, bright as the dawn, giving me warmth when I am raw. Aethys, light of spring, sun of the world, thou givest me life and purpose. If thine heart be black, if thine intention be impure, thy life is forfeit. For he hath seen, he can see, he will see. Nothing is hidden from his glory. His light touches every corner of the world. Nothing is hidden from his sight. If thou doest thy work in the dark, if thou wouldst keep thine actions hidden, thou shalt be burnt in the sun of the new dawn. Day comes soon. Prepare for the dawn. Nothing is hidden from his reach.